Welcome back to the Let's Talk Business podcast. I'm your host, James Price. Today's podcast is a real treat. We're actually in Coffs Harbour in New South Wales. And no, we haven't been to the beach yet. We've been to something better. We're here at Ozgroup Co-operative, an Australian farmer-owned cooperative. Berry farmers. Ozgroup process and distribute berries. I'm delighted to be shown around their factory here, but also have James Kellaway as our guest. James is the CEO of Ozgroup Co-operative. Great to have you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure,
Hey?
absolute pleasure,
Yeah?
absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Thank you very much. And James, I don't know where to start. We haven't seen each other for over 30 years, for God's sake.
Very true, very true,
And,
very true.
You know, we're not totally grey yet, so that's...
No, long may that be the case.
So we might reveal that later on in terms of how we know each other, but this is a fascinating facility. Can you just tell us a little bit at the top of the pod of just about Ozgroup Cooperative? I'm just interested to, and I think our viewers will be interested just to understand a bit about, you know, what is this business? What makes it tick?
Yeah, look, thanks, James, and very much welcome to you. And it's great to catch up at last.
Yeah.
Having said that, Ozgroup itself, it's one of Australia's largest farmer cooperatives, and focusing on berry production, berry grading, packaging and dispatch. And to that extent, we have a network of 140 members, all of which are growers, growing blueberries, raspberries and blackberries. So those three berry types across the footprint of about 1,100 hectares, about 32 different varieties of blueberries, about 3 varieties of raspberries and 2 varieties of blackberries.
Wow. Yeah.
And the business has been going as a cooperative since about 2013,
Right.
and it's been going since about 2003, 2004 as a proprietary business. So it changed to a cooperative in 2013.
Yeah.
Because of the cooperative nature, we welcome members, and as a result, it's very much a social business model where all members are valued and all members count.
So a member is a member, they're all the same, I guess, no matter how many berries they produce, yeah?
That's correct. They're all treated equally.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some larger growers, some smaller growers. We have growers of different varieties, different types of berries. But the one thing that unifies them all is that they're a member of the cooperative. Yeah. It is their cooperative, it's their business, it is their production facility.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And James, why are berries so sexy a fruit? What's the, look, I have berries. There are 2 things that have got me involved in berries. One is every breakfast I have berries, blueberries. The other is we tried to grow a blueberry plant at home, and unfortunately our corgis ate the berries the first year, and that ruined it. Right, but that's the only experience I've had with berries. Your farmer members are obviously a lot smarter than that. But why is it so sexy, the berries? Is there particular health, qualities that make it a premium fruit?
The beauty about berries as a product itself is it's a very versatile product. So it can be used as a centre of the plate meal item, right? As an ingredient or in a recipe, for example, right? Yeah. It can be used as a main meal or a snacking item. So the versatility or convenience of the product is very apparent. Yeah. Not only does it fit that criteria from a functional food perspective, but it also delivers great health benefits. Yeah. It's a great antioxidant, full of vitamins and minerals. So as a natural food, or as I call it, a whole food, it's very nutritious. And it tastes great.
Well, it does.
Great.
Our videographers here on the pod, Jaden and Seth, I'm concerned that your productivity in the factory might be a bit low today because, I noticed a few berries and they weren't there when I looked the second time.
It's really nature's candy. I call it nature's candy, especially blueberries and to a lesser extent raspberries and blackberries, which have a different function. But blueberries, it's nature's candy.
And is our consumption as Australians, is that going up, down or staying static? Or?
It is increasing. Having said that though, I'd like to see it increase at a faster rate. At the end of the day, across the total category, I'd like to see demand growing faster than supply in order to put upward pressure on price, generally speaking. And I think there's more the industry needs to do in the market to promote the virtues of the product and to increase demand.
But is that
aside, demand is increasing organically. It's just naturally increasing.
But when you say increasing the demand, are you talking about the product as it is, or are you talking about variations of the product as well? As you were talking before about, a few marketing developments that you've been working on.
It's more the fresh product itself.
Okay.
Because when you get increases in consumption of the core product, the fresh product, you'll also get natural increases in any value-added product that may also hit the market. I'm not saying you totally rely on that natural organic increase of those value adds, but there is a flow-on effect. It's a blueberry product, must be good for you, or I remember the convenience of the product, or those communication messages on health and other nutritional benefits. So we do want to add value, and we are in the operation here, but at the end of the day, the fresh product is our core business.
Yeah, nice. And those grower members, are they all nearby or are they spread far and wide?
Look, if you look at this Australian map or production, most of it is in the Coffs Harbour region in terms of berry production. In terms of our footprint, our 1,100 odd hectares, that stretches to the north as far as Grafton and to the south just beyond Maxville. So there is about a 100-kilometre stretch there. Having said that, we also have a couple of growers in Queensland who send their berries down to us, who are part of the co-op. And inland, we go about 20 kilometres. So that's a fairly tight footprint across Australia for the production of berries. And we have our 140 grower network within that footprint.
That's interesting. And they obviously work closely together, and you intimated for about 20 years that group is essentially been Ozgroup in one form or another.
That's correct. And originally the business was known as Ozberries, and then when it became a cooperative, it changed its name to Ozgroup. Initially starting with 4 growers, they had the foresight, and over time, over those 20 years, built up to a network of about 140 members.
Amazing Australian business.
Very much so.
James, I've got to ask you, we knew each other 3 decades ago, something like that, because we worked for the same business at the time, at separate times, but nearby.
Yes.
And that was the New South Wales Meat Authority, as it was back then. So that was focused on red meat, James. Steak, pork. Well, pork's not a red meat, but steak, lamb, what have you. And we were licensing abattoirs and butcher shops, and there was a bit of marketing, and there's a bit of market reporting and analytical work, and there was some regulation. And we were both young Turks, really starting out on our career as analysts and other things at the time. Red meat to berries. That's a big jump. Now, how has that happened, James? Hey?
It's been that in itself is a big jump, but there has been a journey along the way, I suppose, James, and I suppose from I think 2 years at the Meat Authority, and then I moved on to the national organisation, being Meat and Livestock Australia, in more of an export capacity. And had time overseas, and that was still part of the learning curve. And then after about 10 years in red meat, I thought, look, I really, even though I enjoy it, I really want to expand my thinking and experiences elsewhere. So I entered the fresh produce business, again, sort of taking on the capacity and learnings on export in terms of exporting fruit and vegetables, mainly fruit, up into Asia. And then from there I went to poultry. So the journey through poultry for 13 years.
From red to white.
Red to white. And now back into fresh produce with berries. And my wife says wine's next. So, so I'm trying to go around.
Nice finisher.
Trying to go around I suppose the whole food sector.
Yeah. So if you think about that, I mean, it's all food, and it's all agricultural produce of one form or another. And it sounds like your focus has been very much marketing, development, trade related at that end of the chain. Is that fair?
Yes.
Fair to say.
Yes.
And coming to a business like Ozgroup, which is at its heart, I guess, apart from the growing aspect, which your members take care of, although Ozgroup supports obviously closely, it's essentially a manufacturing business, processing manufacturing business, and a distribution business. Yeah. How have you leveraged your career to date into this role? You've been in the role about 2 years.
Yes. Yeah. So I suppose, James, for me, it's always a path of continual learning and continual development, continual learning of one shape or another, right? Whether it's personally at home with the family or whether it's in business in some professional capacity. And I always want to learn more. I've got that hunger for learning, and I've learned a lot here. Right? But I'd also like to think, and I think the board would too, where I'm contributing quite a bit. And all those learnings over those 30 years have sort of have really, I suppose, melded into a situation where I've been able to bring some skills into this business, and that has driven productivity growth through the business, albeit a supply chain type business, which is different to where I've been in the past. But not only in terms of productivity from a people management perspective, but also from a product development perspective and business development perspective. And that's what excites me about this business, is I can leverage off the learnings of others. I can provide that empowerment through leadership and people management to those who know that part of the business extremely well. Yeah. But on the flip side, add the value in the business, which has been relatively new to this business.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I want to talk about the productivity piece, but the learning piece, you like learning, and I think I get that, but why? What makes you tick that makes you a good learner, do you think?
I think at the end of the day, it's to do with your motivation, your attitude, as it relates to just life generally. And if you've got a good outlook on life, you'll want to learn more. You'll want to take more in, right? And
is that a curiosity, or is it just the way you're wired?
To me, I think it's a curiosity. Having said that, I think we are all hardwired where we want to contribute, we want to deliver. I think that is hardwiring in all of us. And if those natural abilities of people are managed well, right, and are led, then I think you can get the best out of people, because people are hardwired to deliver. They're motivated. They want to give. Now, there's some people that don't, but I would suggest they've been on a journey in their past where maybe they haven't been managed the best. Maybe they haven't been led. That doesn't mean they can't be with different people or different environments.
Understand.
But if people are sort of, if they're corralled and managed and sort of given an opportunity it's amazing what they can contribute.
Well, let's build on that, because you were telling me about the productivity aspects of the business over the 2 years that you've been here, and you compared it to the, I guess, to the cost of processing a tray of berries in terms of what you charge your members versus what you previously charged. Are you happy to share some of that example and how, you know, how those productivity gains were achieved? I think that'd be interesting in the context of what you've just spoken about in terms of people.
Yeah, so I need to start from the outset on this, James, to say that it's very much a team approach, right? And I really look at team as an acronym. You know, together everyone achieves more, right?
Yeah, right.
So
Nice.
it's been very much an effort led by the board, with my input, and then with the senior management team. And then what we've been doing and crafting together in order to develop a footprint that we can translate to production on the floor. Right? Yeah. So that's been the pathway towards developing this increase in productivity. So the increase in productivity is such where we found efficiencies through the business, and productivity to me is the measure of outputs over inputs. So it's this sort of this oi shout, oi, you know. Yeah. Outputs over inputs, and where we can try and generate that growth within the business, and we try and bring real life examples to this. You know, what are we putting into this particular process on the line, and what are we getting out of this process that we can deliver to the next part of the process? And this piecemeal process, right, when you bring it all together, the sum of all the parts, we can deliver a better saving to our members. So our cost upon coming into the business was $8.50 a tray. Right. We've now brought that back to $6.50 a tray. Wow. So on a percentage basis, that's quite high.
That in 2 years?
In 2 years.
Wow. And that from sitting in your member's hat, with a member's hat, a grower of berries, that's the cost that you charge them for processing their tray of berries.
That's the cost we charge them for the service that we offer, which is principally about grading and packing those berries and dispatching them. Yep. But there's also, as you alluded to earlier, James, those on-farm services we provide. Yeah. You know, we have an agronomy team, for example, that goes around and helps agronomic practices in situ where the production is taking place. Yeah, right. And that is a world-class agronomy team. Yeah. We've actually imported a lot of that skill from South America, etc. And it's a great team to provide that additional expertise on the ground.
And that's, I guess, the motivation of that from a business perspective is this business needs production, right? So the agronomy team and that expertise is about partnering with your members to make sure they have every opportunity to produce as much as they can.
We are more efficient as a business and more cost effective, the more volume that comes through. Yeah. So we're in the business of utilising this asset as best we can. I hate lazy assets. We need to utilise this business 24/7, and we're a fair way from doing that. Yeah. Having said that, we've been able to generate significant productivity gains already. But we're looking for new members. We're looking for new supply.
Yeah. And James, what was it again? $8.50 to $6.50 a tray. So as a member, I get a $2 a tray benefit as a result of productivity savings that the business has achieved across its business.
That's correct. Yeah.
If you think about the people involved in the grading floor that we just saw here, how are they doing their job differently than they were 2 years ago to contribute to that overall productivity?
And look, it's been slow, has not happened overnight at all, right? It's been slow. But we've given them a focus. You know, we've given them a vision, a beacon on the hill to aim towards in terms of this business, right? And we've provided some long-term strategic intent for the business. And all of a sudden, once you start sharing that and gaining their input and buy-in into that process through consultation, all of a sudden there's a degree of ownership. And that ownership translates to every day they come to work.
Really?
So from that perspective, not only have they got that ownership, from an individual perspective in terms of where the business wants to go, they've got that ownership from a team perspective too, because now they belong to a team. Right? And that team is empowered on the floor by our senior management personnel as it relates to doing the job the best they can. It gives them that autonomy to provide insight and input into processes moving forward and refinement. So from that perspective, it's given them a reason, right? A reason to be here and a reason to do what they do.
So, James, I really like that. It's exciting, and I guess looking at your team on the floor, I mean, you know, a very motivated bunch of people. I mean, we didn't talk to many because they were so flat out doing what they do, but they were all very focused on working together to achieve an aim. But as devil's advocate, I hear what you've said and I think to myself, as a business owner, this vision thing, this direction, this beacon on a hill, this light, it's hard to grasp, right? Like, you know, how do you bring it into reality? I mean,
it's esoteric. It's intangible.
Yeah.
It's very hard to define. It's like, and something that I'm very cautious of, is when we try and develop the culture within the business here, we relate it back to a set of agreed values. Now, I do emphasise the word agreed, right? Because the values do need to be agreed. Right? There needs to be consensus around those values. I'm very conscious of those values not being what I call shadow values, right? Where anyone can write values down on a wall, on a piece of paper, anyone can put them on a screen. But you need to see those values in practice. Right? So we have a suite of values in this business, and we call those values out. Right? So if there's behaviour that's contrary to those values, we call it out. And it does happen. But there's no better way than to bring those values to life than to call them out when you don't see them. So I'm conscious that we do not want to have shadow values. We want to have values that espouse the practicality of what people do each and every day.
And that's, I mean, again, I put myself in the shoes of one of your grower members. If I was to ask them what they think the values and culture of their cooperative is, what would they say, do you think?
I think they would say the cooperative, right, is agile. I think that'd be one of their first comments they'd make. We're quite agile in terms of market dynamics, where the market is heading, and we see that through implementation of our pack plan and also our value add. So we're quite agile in terms of being accepting of all that dynamism within the market and those movements. The other thing they would say is more recently, I would suggest, is the productivity improvements, because they've started to see that in terms of the dollar value or return. So certainly in terms of the improvements in productivity and efficiency on the floor, it'd be around that space, James, that I would say they would reflect and say, well, that's how I see my Ozgroup.
And I mean, I guess, like, I'm a bit of a numbers person, but every fourth or fifth tray they're getting for nothing now versus 2 years ago.
Very true,
right?
Very true.
And is it fair to say, was the performance all that bad 2 years ago?
No.
Well,
it was on par. It was on par with our competitors locally.
Really?
But now we've been able to generate those efficiencies through different means. There's no one silver bullet, right? It's multifactorial in terms of trying to generate those productivity gains. But what we see now is something that is more efficient, more productive than where we may have been 2 years ago.
So that gives me goosebumps in a positive way, right? Because, like, you can be running a business and running it well and feeling like it's going well. But then what drives you as a team, as a business, as a board to say, well, gee, maybe we can do it better? You know, is there a different way here? Like it's, you know, I think the risk in business, and it happens, I've seen it happen, is that one gets complacent because, you know, if you're performing similar to competition, I guess that's not a bad benchmark necessarily. And it sounds like your grower members were making money 2 years ago, so to speak, from the services that you were offering. So I kind of feel there's a bit of an X factor there in just stepping that up, just that little bit more.
Okay, so you can reflect on maybe a Japanese business principle here called Kaizen. Kaizen is about really change for the good, or how can we actually do things better, right? And the Kaizen principle, to me, talks about positive disruption. So within your complement of staff,
Yeah.
right, your staff team, if you can provide some disruption, right, where, oh, hey, things have changed. Oh, what's going on here? So they don't get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Now, I do emphasise the word positive. It's got to be positive disruption, right? You can't have negative disruption. And if you've got positive disruption, then all of a sudden, your subconscious thought is, well, something's different here. Maybe I've got to behave slightly differently.
Yeah.
Maybe I've got to act and work slightly differently. So that comes back to, in my view, developing an organisational framework along the lines of the strategic intent that's been developed, where there's been buy-in to developing that.
Yes.
So all of a sudden people see, well, that organisational framework makes sense if that's where we want to head. And if you give people the autonomy to fulfil different positions which have been disrupted in that framework, then you're sort of giving them some ownership, some autonomy, giving them a new lease of life, if you like, in terms of their professional aspirations. To me, that's the X factor, is that positive disruption.
And how much has James contributed to the X factor in the last 2 years in terms of that framework? Or how much have you helped unleash the X factor, so to speak, by
My contribution has been solely that of facilitation.
right?
Facilitation. You know, I have great smarts amongst my management team,
Yeah.
obviously amongst the board from a growing perspective and the business generally, and on the shop floor here, in the pack shed. So how can I facilitate those skills, those experiences around a framework where we can all come together and gel as a team and sing from the same hymn sheet towards the goal that we wish to achieve? So I've been one of facilitating this process.
Yeah, right.
I haven't brought the expertise or skill in the supply chain.
No.
That's employed in the business. So how can I harness that and get us all gelling together in a agreed direction?
So to be a good facilitator, what do you have to be good at, James?
People skills, people management, people leadership. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You've got to be good with people. You've got to be able to generate that team, bring that team together, draw on the strengths of each individual within that team, and we all have different strengths. All those different strengths need to be recognised amongst their peers, and as a result, the team can work more collaboratively together and row in that one direction.
Yeah, nice. But where did you learn your facilitation skills?
There's been no formality in that process, James, for me.
Yeah.
It's really been over the last 30 years, my career to date. Working with people, working with suppliers, working with customers, what are the real metrics of business? What are the hot buttons that actually get people to come together? It's really been built up over time. Observing, open to learning, being motivated, having the right attitude, and it all comes back, I think, it comes back to that issue of curiosity. And as humans, we're all curious. We're all curious.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Not to be negative at all, but I feel like sometimes facilitation is trumped by conflict. Is that how you find it?
Yes, and I think conflict can be healthy. You know, bring it to the surface. You know, bring it to the surface. I want to know it. I want to hear it. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Because I want to challenge it.
Yeah, nice.
And I want to challenge
So you're going to take it head on.
Yeah, I want to challenge it in a very respectful way to say, well, okay, well, why do you have that perspective on this issue, this person, this process, whatever it might be, right? And let's bring them together. Let's bring it head on, because I want to bring it out in the open. We want to move on from conflict. I don't think conflict is a bad thing, but as long as it's managed and addressed.
But better to be brought out than left undone.
Bring it out. Bring it out.
Yeah.
Nothing to hide. Bring it out. Yeah.
We had a former boss. His name was John Carter, and he was very controversial, so to speak. And you know, I'm sure he got involved with a bit of conflict here and there. Do you look back on those days and what did you learn from that environment with John that you might have in your kit bag for today?
I've sort of learnt that it's okay to challenge systems, processes, people. It's okay to challenge, and to maybe put it a bit softer. It's okay to ask the question.
Yeah.
Ask the question. Well, why?
Yeah.
Well, why is it done that way? You know, I'm trying to learn. Why is it done that way and not this way? Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. It's akin to a 4, 5, 6-year-old child. Some may say they ask dumb questions. Well, as a matter of fact, upon reflection, some of those questions actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But for some reason, in adulthood, we're conditioned, or society conditions us a certain way, and we say, well, maybe that was actually a really good question.
Yeah.
And you're able to challenge society.
Yeah.
Now you're sort of brought up in the great swathe of society and that wave, but in a business environment where the system can be defined as the business boundary, you can, within the confines of that boundary or within that context, challenge or ask questions.
Yeah.
And I always, when people say to me, oh, look, I'm sorry, this might be a stupid question. There's no stupid questions, because I've probably asked just as many.
Yeah.
So it's a case of not being fearful of that process. I think it's a very healthy process.
Yeah. Facilitation, is that the same as negotiation? Do you have to be a good negotiator to be a facilitator?
I think the facilitation, I think there is a degree of similarity, but my view is the facilitation is a third party when negotiation could be part of the other two parties.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, I think negotiation's a part of the facilitation role, but I think the traditional pure definition of negotiation is between the two active parties. So I might get 2 of my senior managers negotiating across their business units. So my facilitation might be to assist that negotiation process. Maybe asking a Dorothy Dix.
Maybe to get something out on the table.
Maybe questioning and challenging each individual, as you say, to get it out on the table, James. So I think that is the role of the facilitator. How can we generate that better outcome given the smarts of these 2, 3 or 4 people, or this team?
I really like this discussion, James, because, you know, we talk a lot about culture and leadership and people management and what have you, and sometimes you only get to that level, right? But I think we've drilled down into some of the mechanics of how to actually make it work, right? And I think you know, sometimes because business owners don't necessarily know some of those mechanics, it's seen as too hard.
And I think we talk about people management and culture, you know, team development, trust. We talk about these things. You know, it's part of the vernacular, if you like. But how do you bring it to life? You know, what are the tangible steps? And to me, the tangible steps are the more important parts rather than the language itself. Because the tangible steps will get you the result. The language in isolation won't. So to me, it's the practical steps on the floor It's all against that philosophy, that Japanese business philosophy of Kaizen, of the change for good. How can we do things better? That continuous improvement. Because we may have shifted the productivity to a certain level based on some agreed metrics. Well, how can we continue to shift it?
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but do you think 650 might be underdoing it, James?
Well, I'd like to think that we will get that back even further.
Yeah.
Given what I now know in this business, and there's still a lot I can learn from this business, but given what I now know, I think we can do better in certain parts of the business.
And do you think, as a result of the business having that framework and achieving as a business that productivity by way of example, do you think that process potentially has then now unleashed people within the business to go find more, perhaps that they weren't looking previously necessarily? Is that part of it?
I think so, and simply because they now have a goal, they have a strategic intent where the business wants to go and their contribution to that. I had, just as an anecdote, I had one of the workers the other day cross me, in the eye, and we're walking against each other. We just passed each other, and he said, "Hi, boss." And I said, "Boss? No, I'm not the boss. I might be the boss of what I do, but you're the boss of what you do." Right? Yeah. And doesn't matter who you are or what role you play within the organisation, you fulfil a critical function, a critical role, which is part of the team. It's part of that broader puzzle that develops and delivers the picture at the end of the day. And I think that's important, where everyone needs to be recognised for the value that they add to the business, no matter what their function is. And I think that's important.
I think you've hit on something that's a core issue really for all humans, right? If one feels they're not valued, either in a personal setting or a business setting or a community setting, then it's not a very good thing. Your soul and heart feels bad, doesn't it, as an individual? So.
And we all have a role in society to contribute. Right? Now, how are we contributing? And yes, we all contribute in different ways, and that's fine. Right? Yeah. But we all have an innate desire to contribute, and we all have a responsibility to contribute to a society, to an economy, to a community. And whether that community is the workplace or whether it's a broader community, the community might be the family unit. Yeah. But in the context of the profession, the business here, it's the staff team that you can empower, you can provide autonomy to, and you can develop.
Yeah. James, as a leader in this business, as CEO, what are some of the big challenges that you face? Are they more external things to the business in this type of business?
Yeah, so I suppose the real issues or challenges that we face and the ones that concern me are those issues or challenges which I'd consider to be externalities. Right? They're external to the business. We have less control, for want of a better term, over those issues, or less influence over those issues. And they're really the ones that you need to try and influence among a broader community or stakeholder group. Yeah. So the ones within the confines of the business are more manageable and can be addressed maybe more easily. However, those externalities to the business, you need to consult and liaise with a broader stakeholder group within the broader community to bring some type of improvement or resolution to those. And the obvious one from a farming perspective is the weather. Who do you consult on the weather?
Bit tricky, isn't it?
So from that perspective, and you can come right down to that to more more tangible issues within the community or within the operating environment.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do in the business here is, amongst our grower network and my career to date, is how can you generate a better operating environment? So at an industry level, that is your role. How can you create a better operating environment for your suite of businesses within that industry?
Yeah.
At a business level, it's more so how can you create a better operating environment for your employees, your staff team. So it's just different levels, given different roles that you may have. But to me, it's those external factors or issues or challenges that sort of keep me awake at night.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, and some of them are tricky to, well, they're uncontrollable, right? So I guess, so then you've got to set about some risk management strategies in terms of, I guess from weather is in part an issue of geography, so obviously greater diversity of production may be a factor to help you there, but it's not going to be the only factor, is it?
So we identify those inherent risks. You know, we try and put control measures in place, and then we have a suite of residual risks. And then it depends on the risk appetite of the organisation. Well, are we prepared to accept those risks? Yeah. Or do we need additional control measures? And it's interesting to note within this business the tension between strategy and risk.
Yeah.
You know, does strategy lead risk or does risk lead strategy? And that's an interesting conundrum for farmers. It's quite a tension between those two. Do you set the strategy based on your risk appetite, or do you set your risk appetite based on your strategy? And to me, I think that's quite interesting.
So a farmer-led organisation, is it risk adverse, or is it perhaps more aggressive in its risk taking?
To me, there's some natural risks there that need to be managed or try to be managed, but there's a suite of risks that can't be managed.
Yeah.
But as long as they're identified and where you can mitigate, there's no such thing as zero risk, but where you can mitigate that risk, we do. And a classic one, for example, that we've been through here is in terms of insurance cover.
Yes.
And insurance cover on ISR, which is industrial special risk. Firstly, it's hard to get insurance on that. And secondly, if you can get insurance, the premiums are significant for that event. So what is the risk of that event happening?
Yeah.
Do you self-insure? Do you actually try and take out insurance at the best rate you can, knowing that the environment of that type of insurance is quite high from a premium perspective, let alone that of what an excess might be. So you can look at an insurance type process or model across the total business. How do I mitigate this? You know, what is the premium you need to pay for this risk within the system or in the process? And what's the excess if it was to happen?
Yeah.
You know, that's outside of purchasing insurance. It's just looking at risk within the business.
Thinking about the risk and thinking about whether it's how you deal with it.
Yes.
Yeah. Top of the organisation in some respects, although, you know, maybe not an autocratic model, but, you know, CEOs, the leadership role, very, very definitely. Is it lonely?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it's an island.
Yeah.
It's an island. You have the board and your stakeholders who are non-executive, the directors, and the stakeholders obviously being akin to shareholders or members.
Yeah.
And they're not part of the business day to day. But then you have the staff complement, your team, which are here day to day with you. So you're trying to set the direction from those that are not part of the day-to-day and provide input into that process because they're not part of the day-to-day in terms of understanding. But then again, you're trying to accept and take on board where they want to head from a vision perspective. And then day-to-day, how can we execute that? Working with your staff team through the agreed organisational framework to deliver on that strategic intent.
So is there a risk that sometimes, excuse the pun, that you feel like you're the meat or the berry in the sandwich, so to speak?
Yes, very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
And that's why, in my view, and I suppose I don't do enough of it, but that's why if you can consult and liaise with your peers, what are their challenges in their business? You can share your challenges, your issues, the considerations that you've got from different perspectives of the business with like-minded people in similar roles. It's hard to turn left on one day and speak to the non-executive directors or your members, but then turn right the other day or the following day and speak to your cohort of full-time engaged employees, your staff team. Trying to bring the two together is the difficult task of this individual or this role.
Yeah, but I guess that framework and beacon and light and direction that you spoke about before must help weld those two pieces together. Your board are all growers, effectively. So does that mean they're all pretty much technical people, technical specialists, really, in what they do? Or do they bring a degree of strategy and sort of broader innovation, I guess, about future ideas and aspirations? Is that something that percolates from that?
Yeah, well, certainly the role of the directors, with their fiduciary duties, they have a role across the total organisation. They have ultimate responsibility. And at the end of the day, they need to have some skill and expertise in that space. But I think you can have that skill or expertise as a farmer, because a farming business is just that, it's a business. Right? So yes, you need to be technically competent in terms of growing something or producing something, but there's some business smarts around being able to do that. Maybe that does not reflect the traditional farmer as we may more broadly know, but farming today is very much that holistic, whole of business approach.
Yeah, it is.
And the directors need to have that across the total business. Not only from a production perspective, the logistics through the supply chain, the overall governance of the organisation for the betterment of the members, but also from a dispatch, distribution, sales and marketing. So it's that whole of chain across the business, and they need to have that interest and understanding and also contribution to the business. And they need to be able to bring those smarts by way of looking at, well, how does that influence strategy in terms of where we want to go? But it's also up to, and this is why I come back to the team, I suppose, description, where it's up to the management team through the CEO or with the CEO in collaboration with the directors. It's very much a whole of team approach.
How does the CEO know if he's done a good job?
I know if I've done a good job in terms of, there's many metrics in my view, right? And for me, it's a matter of us firstly establishing those metrics, which we did not have. But it's not a case of just establishing any metric. You've got to establish the metrics that are meaningful to the business. Those metrics that are meaningful to your strategic outcome that you wish to achieve. Then it's a continual process of monitoring and measuring against those metrics. If those metrics are being achieved or exceeded, then in my view, the job is being done. Now, some of those metrics are soft. They're not all hard metrics. And those soft metrics really relate to people management, people leadership. Right? How can we develop a cohort of team members that are going to deliver? Because the most important asset of this business is the staff. It's the team on the floor.
I'd like to pick up on that a little bit, because metrics, we used to spend a lot of time doing business valuations where we would look at particularly the financials. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've taken a tact where we look strongly at the financials and the metrics. But we look at what's called a health factors. And it goes right to the sustainability of an organisation. For instance, if you've got a salesperson and they've got a particular target, and that target's been achieved for the 12 months, and you say to yourself, well, I'm going to measure your performance, and they've over-exceeded on the sales target. But then, if you look at the health factor, that one of the health factors for those sales targets might be, well, what's their pipeline look like moving forward? Now, if they haven't got a pipeline, but they've achieved their target, I would say, you know, I don't know that I'm going to reward them 100%, because how sustainable is what they've done? So do you feel part of your role is looking at those sustainability factors? In other words, this business is here today, but we want it to be here for another 20 years. So what are the factors that are going to make sure that it is?
Yeah, so my view on that, James, is amongst those suite of metrics, there needs to be those short, medium and long-term measures across the business. If you're just focused on short-term metrics, annual metrics, for example, or maybe even shorter monthly metrics, then you're really not associating that with the long-term goal of the business. You know, what is the strategic outcome you want? And by way of timeline, I sort of frame that in that 5 to 10 year horizon.
Yeah, okay.
So what are the metrics you need in place in order to get there, right? And to me, you need those bite-sized metrics. But then again, you also need those longer-term measures where you can say, well, we are moving in that direction. Right? Rather than just saying we are moving in a direction through short-term measures, are we moving in the right direction given the strategic intent of the business? So to me, the suite of metrics, KPIs you may say, they're critical to get the right ones, because anyone can come up with a lot of metrics, a lot of KPIs. Right? But at the end of the day, it's better to have fewer, more meaningful KPIs that are going to address the short, medium and long-term objectives of the business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. 30 years ago, did you ever think you'd be in a role like this?
No. No, and people ask me, where do you think you'll be in 5 years' time? Over my career.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, I don't know. I just don't know. Or where do you want to be? And again, I don't know. Because new opportunities lead you to new pathways that you either accept and take up, or you say, no, I'm still on a pathway that I'm comfortable. Right?
Does that another way of saying that is that James's career was about casting himself to the breeze?
Basically.
But I mean, there's something very uplifting about that, right? Because I think you have to have a degree of vulnerability to do that. You know, a sort of a trust in oneself, but also a sense that, well, I don't know everything, but maybe we'll find out if we go down this path.
I think the vulnerability was probably the curiosity.
Yes.
So having that curious approach or take. I can remember being at school, going on a school excursion to the egg board. And the egg board was out at Lidcombe, I think it was.
That's right, yeah.
And I remember going out there and returning and saying, I will never be involved in the egg industry. I couldn't stand it because I've got a family background in beef and lamb production and wool production, and yet I spent 13 years in poultry.
That's amazing, isn't it?
13 years. And it was that curiosity that sort of led me there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the curiosity, it was actually the people. So when you have that opportunity, when you have the right people guiding you or assisting you or helping to develop you, it helps generate that curiosity of, well, where will this lead? Where will this take me? And I think that's an important life skill, life lesson.
Well, and it is. I mean, you've lived it, but I think anyone in their early days, embarking on their career, it's easy sometimes to be driven by high expectations, but perhaps expectation is not the best driver.
No, I don't think so. And I think if we remain curious, we're asking questions, we're challenging concepts or the or the current state of affairs or state
Yeah.
of mind. And I just sum that up as being a healthy process. And it's not to be disrespectful, it's basically just to that Kaizen approach of continuous improvement.
Yeah, love it, James. James, thank you very much for having us at Ozgroup Cooperative today. And it's been a great honour to catch up with you after 3 decades and learn about what you've done and what you're doing here as a team to make this business even better than it already is.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, James.
Yeah. Well, what an exciting interview with James Kellaway at Ozgroup Cooperative here in Coffs Harbour. And I often talk about continuous improvement, but today I think we had the best example, or an exciting example of a productivity improvement that's happened here in a business that 2 years ago was performing well, but now, current day, it's providing its members with even more value in terms of the performance and services because of an approach that is about wanting to do things just a little bit better.